the Community Planning and Transportation Committee meeting for Thursday, May 22nd, 2025. We have 3 items on the agenda this month. The first one is our regular presentation and discussion of the public transit ridership report, and we have city staff here to go over that conversation with us.
Sorry, did you just record? Okay, we figured out.
All right.
You're good, go ahead.
I think that was a go ahead.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Chair and council members. Happy to come back and give a report as always. Have our memo at the beginning of the report, as we usually do. I did want to touch on a few things, specifically I think I'll go to the ridership first, and then maybe circle back around to the microtransit discussion we've been having the last few months. So, in the ridership report for Embark First, total with fixed route and paratransit, we had just shy of 46,000 rides in April, which is a little bit more than 10,000 more than last April, which is really good. And then fiscal year to date, since July 1, we've had 420,000 rides, which is about a 27% increase of last year's total, about 90,000 more rides this fiscal year. For fixed route specifically, of that 45,800 or just shy of 46,000, we had 43,699 rides in April, and then in the plus or paratransit side, we had 2,139 rides in April. So as you can see there for the individual routes, all of them have increased last month, except for the Social Security route, which, as we talked about, can fluctuate so much and the numbers are so low that it's easy to be misconstrued. And then on Saturday service, the only one that dipped last month was the 110 Main Street, and then Plus was up as well. And then I just want to point out that the ridership per service hour for weekday fixed route was 20.99 or 21, so that's 21 riders on average per service hour we put out there, and that's about a 10 or 11% increase. But that is a really, really good, efficient number, I'll say, for us to be above 20 riders per service hour. And then another way to look at it is we're averaging about 1,850 people a day that we serve on a weekday. So really good. And then for Norman On Demand, we had 3,724 rides in April, which is up from 2,539 last April, so about 1,200 increase on Norman On Demand, or 31%. And then for those using wheelchair accessible vehicles, that increased from 15 last April to 30. So fiscal year to date on Norman On Demand, we've had just under 39,000 riders. And then keeping on with Norman On Demand, I know last month we talked a little bit about the budget and some things that staff were trying to do to maybe zero in on things we could cut and try to keep all the services same with the budget issues we're facing. And last month I did hint at some of this, but just wanted to reiterate it, that between what we've been able to do and some interesting things that have been brought forth and we've been able to explore with VIA, the contractor, and OU. Right now our contract with VIA, the microtransit provider, is 12 months, but it runs late August to late August, and we talked about doing, it's not 10 months, but 10 months in a week or so contract just to get us through next fiscal year, shave down about a month and a half of expenses, or approximately a month and a half. And we could then continue to have the discussion into the next fiscal year on the service. And at least according to the budget book, and then adding back in the revenues from microtransit as well as the expenses, if we did that, we probably have about $84,000 if everything went well. I think I said last month that's about a 1% of our budget, which is not good for any savings account, but it is in the black. So, and then I know council was interested in the fare increase. And VIA did look at a fare increase. One of the things we really want to zero in on, though, is we have the 6 free rides for any new riders still going since we started. And cutting that back, and that's what we're gonna start doing, is at least 2 rides, and then probably following the start of this fall semester, if we continue, we'd probably cut that down after the start of the fall semester, just to decrease, there's been some fraud with that, but also just to increase some revenue with the free rides as well. And, but if they did analyze adding in $1, it's not $5, I think like what was said, but 2 to 5 is kind of extreme for transit riders to adjust to for any fare. But we did examine $3, and they've seen that happen in other markets where they've increased it $1. And they think that that'll increase our revenues from approximately, it's about $700 to $1,000 a month in fare revenue right now, to maybe $4,500 to $5,000 a month. Well, again, this is all just speculation, but best guess. But it would also decrease ridership maybe by about 30%. Trade-off, but it could be a little bit of a good thing, because we have a lot of demand that we're not able to meet right now, because we just don't have the service out there that people want. Now, they could still be getting where they need to go. They could take fixed route instead. When the service overlaps, they could be taking another service like Uber or Lyft. But at least when they try to book with us, we're not able to meet that demand for them. And we're trying to get better at it. We're about 80% that we're able to provide a ride request, and if they take it or not, that's up to them. So that's kind of where we're at on microtransit, and just want to see what you guys thought about that.
I do like paring back some of the things, especially I didn't realize there was fraud with the 6 free rides.
That was a little bit of a new thing with me as well, so you find fraud with everything. But
say how they were doing it? Was it through the app?
I think people were creating
new accounts,
new emails over and over again.
Okay.
So, and they've been able to zero in, it's above my head, but
probably
the device,
yeah.
Zero in on that and say you can't have more than 2 accounts created on device. So giving some leeway if something happened with their account, but honestly.
Yeah, people are struggling and getting creative, I guess.
Yep.
Because it can't be fun to create all those accounts.
Yeah.
Okay, so $1 add-on, not 3, but 3's been seen in other markets.
Well, they've seen $1 increase in other markets. I think one case study was from 2 to 3, but we're just trying to think of a modest increase rather than almost doubling it on the first meeting go. But if council's still considering that, we certainly could.
I would say I like a modest increase, and we'll just see how the budget goes from year to year. And then you said it could cut ridership by 30%. And when you said 39,000, was that rides or actual individual riders?
Those are individual riders. I could give you the trip, but the number they gave me was about a 30% decrease in ridership. So
From that number.
from the 39,000,
yeah. Okay, well.
But this is a trade-off. If we had fare on fixed route, this is something that we'd have to consider every time we think about raising rates. You know, this is gas prices go up, people drive on the roads less. It's just an elasticity number. When prices go up, trips go down.
With bus rates, are there special passes for people who are super low income or?
For VIA or for?
Well, I was just gonna say, when you were talking about fixed routes in the future, looking at fares.
Yeah, if we did do fare on fixed route, we would do half fare for.
Under a certain income level?
I believe it's required to be, it's been so long since we've had a fare, I have to remind myself. But it's for those over 65 and those with accessibility issues, they could get half fare on fixed route. I don't know that there is a low income, but that's also a local decision at some level too, that you could, like the CDBG program that we had, that was low income, right? That funds were used to help pay for those rides, so.
I'm just thinking also too how like maybe homeless individuals get around as well.
At Embark OKC, they do a hall pass program for students. You know, that's kind of again, a local decision on the fare, as long as you're adhering to those half fare and other rules with it.
And I would assume probably verifying incomes is too much for VIA, so there is no such program for them.
No, there is, and it's really hard to do that. Even if we did it, we'd have to figure out a way to pass along those passes and verify that income on the fixed route service. And I think the fare is low enough on microtransit or Norman On Demand that I don't know that we need to really.
And I think $1 is modest. would be interested to see if that was a 30% reduction, but.
We just had to see, and I think some of it, the reduction is thought to be with the free rides being really tackled. So,
Okay.
and they've already initiated that to control the fraud and to cut down on it. So that could be some of it too, but we'll, again, just have to see.
Okay, oh, that's my thoughts, so thanks.
I guess with a fair, kind of what I would be thinking would be, it could, within the first mile, it would still be $2 flat fee. And then another mile, it's $3. And then the next mile, it's $4, something like that, where
Yeah,
it's a little bit more the further you go out. But if you're still within, if you're
right.
just going within a mile of your destination, it still would be $2. But if you're trying to go all the way across town.
We talked about that internally with VIA, and they said our zone is so small, well, relative to other markets that they serve, that we could do that, but it's just not a huge zone that,
That's how Arlington had it was distance based, and it was anywhere from $3 to $5 depending on
Yeah.
how far you're going,
yeah, so we could still explore that.
but it was
And I
much
would
larger.
say too,
Yeah.
people who don't have means usually are further away from where things are populated, where services are, so it would kind of penalize them more.
Okay. Anything further on?
No, I think getting rid of the free rides is reasonable. I mean, that seems like something that you would do in the pilot, and if we're trying to keep the pilot extended beyond the pilot, let's remove the things that are limiting us from doing that, so.
Yeah,
that's
I think
fair.
the hope was that obviously only new people would take advantage of that, and it just became clear that
Yeah.
we shouldn't be having this many new riders all the time.
I
So
agree.
I think they finally identified that.
So does that reflected in the 39,000 too, when we say individual riders, is some of that repetition? Or like, however many accounts somebody might take out?
Yeah, that's just the raw ridership. So whether it was free, Safe Ride is free because OU, that's what we agreed to with OU. So it's any ride.
So you might also potentially see that number go down because of all those excess accounts.
Right.
Okay.
And
But again, that would help folks that
Need
that
the-
that need the rides, that are paying for it. That'll
Yes.
help them get the service maybe more often because there's less demand, right?
I feel comfortable with that, so.
do they, when somebody wants, does the app say how many people are, right, like, group of people are at the bar, one of the friends has the app, they call the ride, but 6 of them get in the van. Does it count all 6 of them, or just the person who used the app and actually requested the ride?
Yeah, so you have to make sure you put that person in when you're requesting the trip. So if we were going somewhere and I had 5 friends, I'd have to do myself plus 5 others and pay the $1 extra per person. But
Okay.
so we'd know how many people we were picking up. But that's when I say ridership, that's all the people that are getting a ride, and we have the trip numbers too. But I usually talk about ridership, so I could give you the trip numbers, and that's more of the you go as a group number. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else about on demand? Okay.
So if it's okay, what I'm hearing is we should explore keeping it for the next year if we can. And try to work that in. And
Yes.
I'll go back and we'll talk about it.
Budget amendment, on it, yeah,
We're able to
so
do
it'll come
the
through as a budget amendment.
10-month or whatever. Yeah.
Okay.
That's good.
We did explore service reductions, but I think if we can keep it within the budget, and then maybe we really take a hard look at that in the spring or the fall, along with figure out those times that we overlap and try to maybe, if we're gonna again keep on demand into the future, we try to really hone in on if we want to overlap as much in the
So-
weekdays.
The budget amendment doesn't take, like, we're not reducing the overlap at this point.
Mhm.
Okay.
No, I'd really like to study it some more and make sure we're making the right choice on which one and which direction. So if that makes sense.
Just real quick, the 10.5 months, was that determined to basically coincide with the fiscal year ending? Okay.
Just buys us, again, another year as we work through these budget issues.
I didn't know if it was summer because students were out or something.
That way it lines up instead of being
Yeah, and
August.
That
it
makes
also
sense.
helps us with that too.
So the
Yeah.
draft budget did not have it in there, so that's why we'll do a budget amendment for your adoption.
And under this proposal, it may not need general fund help, but maybe a little.
Well, that's
You said the 84th, maybe
that-
a slight, tiny.
the 84 is not needing it, so it would be 84 in the black without it. If
84.
everything holds and I'm correct, which,
And then mid-year come back if there's a problem, a catastrophe.
yeah, just like any of the budgets in the city, you know, if anything's going on, so.
Okay. On public transit, we did have comments last month from the public about some of the issues with the app or the Embark and Plus and new software and scheduling and things like that. I don't know if you had any updates about any of that or if you guys need more time.
Yeah, thank you for asking. So we met with myself and Embark staff met with passengers at the AW on May 12th, so last Monday, and had a great meeting, just really diving into the issues, which you had heard some of them, but I think it was a great meeting. We were actually able to identify one problem while we were there with a rider that had a trip there, and the Embark staff, we were able to figure out what was happening. And I think we were able to really hone in on, there's some training opportunities with the drivers that they weren't necessarily doing anything wrong, but something wasn't computing right with the new software, and we just needed to train them on how to think of it this way versus that way. And there was some other tweaking that we could do with the software, but we agreed to meet again on June 20th, so about a month out, to discuss how it was going after the things we talked about were hopefully improved. And since last Monday, I haven't received any direct complaints on long trips being left, any of the things that we heard. And then I heard from Embark today that they had neither. Now, that's less than 2 weeks. That's why I think we should give it the month before the next meeting. And if we do hear complaints, or if anybody has any issues, they're welcome to send them to us or Embark. But so far, it seems to be improving, or at least on its face, so.
Transit centers, another one.
Mhm.
There's been issues with the restroom.
Yep.
Certain other transit centers around the country have public restrooms as part of the facility, so certainly some way that can be remedied and remain in use, I would assume.
Yeah.
Actually, I was gonna ask, will we see some of the information about those outdoor toilets we talked about at the, maybe beginning of this month, actually? I forgot what they were called.
Portland Loop.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, first on the transit center, we opened up the restroom last Thursday, and then we quickly had to shut it Saturday morning because unfortunately the toilet backed up. We got that all fixed on Monday. I haven't heard of another issue yet, but we're just monitoring and make sure it's staying in good working order. We are only opening it when the security personnel's there, so that's noon to 8 Monday through Friday, and then 11 to 7 on Saturdays. And if we adjust the security hours, that'll adjust with it. That's kind of what we agreed to. It just helps, keep eyes on it if we need it. I don't know when we're gonna bring the Portland Loop back, or I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I don't think we have that scheduled, but we can certainly bring that back. I think staff had started to look into it. I know Lance had looked into it a little bit. And I think we'd started to kick around like what it would cost and where possibly we could do it with a minimal amount.
We're okay with August, like let us get through a retreat and have that as a part of the retreat process. But,
Okay.
yeah, I'm not in a rush because I think it's gonna take time.
Yeah, I think so too. And in that meeting at the AW, I assume there was discussion about transit at the AW or to the AW bus stop, and we've had the presentation a few months ago about how difficult it would be to alter the route to go over there. Of course, the Norman Regional Health Village project is kind of, I think, up in the air about whether it will or when that might happen. So Johnson Street may not be getting straightened out and sidewalks built on it anytime soon. So,
Right.
so I don't know if that came up during that meeting as well.
No, we really just talked about the plus issues that we were having, and I know that that's been almost an ongoing conversation for a year and a half now, with us, with the awe. So, yeah, in September, we did talk about that, and we discussed service, altering Route 121 that goes south on Porter and stops at Johnson. Just kicking it over to the east a little bit. It's already running, but what we said in September was that Route 121 is already kind of running behind, and it, even though that seems like a small difference, it would really delay that route every hour and just kind of build upon itself a delay in the schedule. So we also looked at the 122 route, which goes from the transit center east on Main, north on 12th, and then west on Rock Creek, turns around there at the 7-Eleven at Rock Creek and Porter. Maybe taking that service away from Robinson to Main, and we can come back and present all this, so I'm not just throwing out a bunch of street names, but Robinson to Main on 12th and shifting it over to Finley maybe. The caveat with that was that we have bus stops on 12th that serve the Walmart and the 7-Eleven areas in there.
Yeah.
And it seems like there is a direct connection between the Garland Square and other, residences at the end of the line and the Walmart area. So we get rid of that direct connection for those folks. It's a trade-off. And then we discussed Embark Well, which is the OKC program that isn't federally required, but it serves seniors. I think it's 55 and plus in OKC. But so it's not paratransit because you have to have a functional disability that enables you to, or makes it unable to use a fixed route bus for paratransit. But this is really just for anybody that's whatever age requirement and older. And what they do is they take you directly to one of their wellness centers and back in OKC, the closest one. And that's what we were starting to discuss. And then it kind of fell off with the holidays and then with the budget discussions.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, how much does OKC pay for Embark Well?
I don't, let me see if it, I did write down some, or I printed off that old September presentation. I don't think it's very much, and they use it until the budget runs out. So I think if they're, by the end of the fiscal year, if they don't have budgets for the trips anymore, they shut off the service or they try to find more. I don't want to misspeak, so I'd love to bring that back, but it looks like in the presentation last year it was about 50,000.
Okay.
So again, it's based on demand. You have to be so much older. You have to, not want to drive yourself, obviously, but.
Is that one of those things, speaking of budgets and making choices, if we were cutting back on some outside agency requests, we could fund things like Embark Well?
That's not necessarily a Taylor question,
Finance person in here?
but
Yeah.
I will say that we're all hurting with sales tax. So while you can fund transit with more funding through general fund, I think that's what we're trying to get away from at the end of the day, is just to protect the general fund. So,
Yeah.
but that's your guys' decision with city manager's office and
I
finance.
had just asked if we were cutting back on outside agency requests, if we could subsidize a little bit for Embark Well, maybe. I mean, I don't know, maybe we might fund other things.
Yeah, so I think it'll just be like when we go through the final budget adoption, depending on how comfortable we are with the reserve and if we want to use some of that. Because I think there are some requests for additional funds from,
Other departments. Okay.
well, I think from some council members are requested to go ahead and add additional funding for some of the other agencies that, so
I guess we'll find out where we are on it.
so,
I've
Yeah.
I've basically told everybody no this year. We're not getting anything. I'm gonna get my water tower project.
yeah, I will find out from Daryl though. I'm not exactly, I'm assuming those make it on, and then it will just be up for the council to decide on whether they're gonna want to.
And I guess we could revisit Embark Well when we're talking about on-demand again. I guess on-demand doesn't really, I would only serve people maybe at certain hours, and I don't
Right.
think it goes to the all like that. I think the all closes around 6 or 8.
Right, so the hours don't necessarily match up,
Align,
but,
yeah.
and at least for the next fiscal year, we're trying to hold the line. That doesn't mean that,
Right,
you know, in
but I
future
mean,
years
depending
we
on
could-
how much that is, if we do have the 85 or 89,000 in federal funds available, and then if we only had to match that with 20%,
Right.
maybe there's something there. Like maybe there's a total of, $100,000 between the federal transit funds, and then we only have to have 20,000 in general funds, then maybe there's something that could explore.
Or again, I'd love for Maryland to come back and talk more about the Embark Well program, because if they're spending 50,000 or even 100,000 in OKC, maybe we could spend 10 or 20 in Norman and just see how it goes.
Yeah.
Maybe we run out in 2 months, but we could try it.
I mean, one possible solution I was thinking of was if we, it would just depend if what we're hearing from some of the feedback is that the Embark Plus is already, I don't know, stretched thin perhaps. But I thought, what if people that had a membership with the AW that we decided to allow them to ride, that they could ride Embark Plus, even if they were 50 years old, but they had a membership at the AW, and as a policy, a local policy decision, would we be even allowed to do that because of the nature of that service?
We just have to be, we'd have to be really careful, because we'd have to prioritize those that were
They
on
do have
that
disability.
paratransit eligible. So we could explore that some more. The overlap might be a little clunky, just making sure that we get everybody that we need to where to go. It's kind of like the zone 1, zone 2 thing though.
Yeah,
We don't have to do zone 2, and if we do need to make some cuts, zone 2 will
probably.
be the ones that don't get rides because we have to do zone 1.
Yeah.
So that would be the conversation.
Yeah, that's just one idea though
Yeah.
about that, and only because of the nature of the building being a senior center, and even if you're not disabled or have any
Right.
mobility, classified mobility challenges, if you're 60
Yeah.
years old, 65, 70, getting older, it might be harder to walk,
Right.
from Porter to over to Finley on Johnson.
And again, we're only talking rides to and from the AW. We're not, for those that wouldn't be paratransit eligible, right?
Yeah.
So it would be a very distinct use case, and who knows what the demand would be, but we could at least explore it maybe with a little bit of funding.
And to me, the goal for me is anyway to funds that have their own dedicated funding sources through voter approval, like the utilities, Norman Forward, transit, public safety. Say, we're never going to be able to fund all public safety through the tax without general fund, but ideally, in a perfect world, things like transit and other things don't need general fund support because they have their own. And we've been able to do that the last couple of years. And before the transit tax, the city did budget general funds for the CART system, I think 500,000 or something like that per year, and then allocated our federal grant money to OU. But so I mean, there's precedent for the city spending quite a lot of money on transit through the general fund, but it'd be nice to not have to rely on that at any point, and it be self-sustaining. So,
Yep, we're trying to do our best. So.
okay, any other comments from you guys?
Okay, did that work?
All right,
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you, Taylor. All right, and the next item on the agenda is discussion regarding the visitability pilot program. We've been kind of discussing for a couple of years in Norman and how homes, I think specifically, could be more visitable for people that may have mobility challenges for one. So we have city staff here to have a discussion with us.
Right. Sorry for the delay there.
Oh, yeah.
For those of you that I haven't met, I'm Bryant Van Fossen, the permit manager for Development Services. Greg Clark, the Development Services Manager, regrets that he couldn't be here tonight. His daughter's graduating.
Yeah.
So he asked me to fill in. So we'll be discussing the visibility pilot program tonight. Just to give you a quick down and dirty definition of visitable versus accessible. Most people think of any type of handicap or ADA that everything is the same, and the requirements are. There is a drastic difference between visitable. Visitable is the lowest end of the accessible spectrum, and full accessible is the other end. When you think of a hospital, that and all the grab bars and the big bathrooms and the big showers and the no-step showers and bathtubs and all those kinds of things, that's fully accessible. Visitable is a small step in that direction above what would be minimally required. Few of the items differing between visitability and accessibility are listed here, but some of the major ones would be the third row between the bathrooms. When you're in a hospital or even some accessible dwelling units in a hotel, you'll see grab bars. And you've probably seen those in restaurants and Walmarts and things of that nature. Well, in a visitable dwelling unit or a visitable home, the grab bars are not required, but the backing for them is required. You can't just screw those into sheetrock, because if you were to just put them into sheetrock and then push on them, they're going to come right out of the wall. So backing is required during construction, so that those grab bars have something to grab a hold of should they ever need to be installed. It'll be much easier to install them at that time. The kitchen, we'll see it in the next slide, but and a fully accessible kitchen requires 60 inches of clearance between appliances and a wall, things of that nature. But a visitable kitchen only requires 40 inches. So not much different than what a typical kitchen would require. And the receptacles. Receptacles for a visitable house, 15 and lighting controls need to be placed between 15 inches, 48 inches from the ground. But in a fully accessible dwelling unit, there is a very complex set of rules based on where those outlets are going to be and reaches and different approaches for those lighting controls. It becomes quite an endeavor to figure out what height all of those things need to be at, as opposed to a visitable dwelling unit. Here's just a quick picture between a fully accessible kitchen and a visitable kitchen. You see the 60 inches and the 40 inches required. And in fact, the 40 could be dropped down to 36 in a visitable dwelling unit if there was no range. So if they had a different kind of cooktop, or the cooktop was around the corner, the clearance can be dropped even further. Give you some background on our current accessible and visitable codes, and just in general how codes are adopted for the city of Norman and for the state of Oklahoma. The 2009 ICC ANSI A117.1 is our current edition of accessible codes, and I know you love this book. It is currently our currently adopted edition of that standard. Where that comes from is there's a state entity called the OUBCC, the Oklahoma Uniform Building Code Commission. They're the state agency that adopts the state minimum codes. They write up the rules that we're going to adopt these codes. There's a committee that puts all that together, that then goes to the actual commission, the commission members, that then propose it to Congress. Congress adopts it, it becomes a state minimum, it becomes the minimum state law. And then all the municipalities adopt that code within a given time frame. That's how the city of Norman has adopted this code. It is the minimum state code, and we've had it adopted for a couple of years now. Well, I guess actually this one's several years, because it was the one referenced in the previous code cycle also. Gotcha. Yep. And OUBCC does that about every 3 years. We have several of our staff that participate in these committees. I was on one recently. Right now, residential codes are being considered and adopted and rewritten at the state level. They should be proposed for this next legislative session.
So 2009.
Yep.
So it gets, a new one is made in 2009, and then ideally every 3 years, there's updates to it.
So
And then every
with
15 years, they make a new one, or what?
with this code, it wasn't every 3 years. The next one that we'll be going to is the 2017. Even though we'll be under the 24 model codes, they reference the 2017 edition of this code. They don't make one of these every 3 years, but the model codes, the International Building Code, Residential Code, so on and so forth, they do make a new one of those every 3 years. They only update this on an as necessary basis. So they haven't, between 2009, 2017, they didn't feel that they needed to, and then come 2017, they felt like they needed to update it. So they updated it a little bit.
We're still in the 2018 building code, even though they've come out with a 21 and a 24. Yep. They just haven't, we haven't adopted those as the current codes.
We haven't, the city of Norman?
Or the state, yeah.
Okay. And we can't be without the state doing it?
We could.
We certainly could, but it would, there's nothing forcing us to. We typically follow suit after the state adopts. There may or may not be exceptions in the newer codes that we don't have in our current codes now, but we would allow any applicant to utilize those newer codes if they so desired. But typically there'd be some potentially more strenuous requirements in the newer codes, which tends to be why we don't adopt the newer code ahead of the time that we have to.
Safety issues?
A lot of more energy.
There
Just the
is-
way technology changes and gets, more efficient.
Yep, so that too,
That's
absolutely.
interesting.
A lot of the life safety stuff is pretty
Yeah.
straightforward about how it's been over the past, 30 years or so.
Okay.
Exactly.
Sorry, I'll take out your breath.
Hey, no problem at all. I should have said in the beginning, comments, questions, very welcome during, and there'll be a time at the end for those also. So a little bit of history on Norman's Visibility Code. In May of 19, there was a citizen ad hoc committee that brought to light this need to encourage visitable or aging in place homes. And that's exactly what this incentive is attempting to do. It's trying to encourage somebody to build a home for somebody that would want to age in place, or just simply wider openings, easier to get into, easier to get around house. And they did a great job in bringing that to light. And it is based on, the original proposal was based on the Fair Housing Act Design Manual, which was published in 1998, and it is exactly what it says. It is a design manual. It is not a standard, whereas this is an adopted standard. That is something that an architect could use as maybe a basis of design or something to assist in their design, but it is not a model code. It's a 300-page document, so rather hefty. So it was used as a basis, as a kind of taken what it said and conglomerated down into a much more understandable concept. So, and then staff provided the recommendations to this committee back in 2021. Consider a 2-year two-year program to adopt the standards from this book for visitability. This book is a little bit more accessible, a little bit easier to understand than us taking requirements from over here and from over there and from over here and putting them into one document. This one already has type C or visitable units found within it. So that's where the requirements came from. And it was proposed as an incentive program. An incentive program where participants in the program could receive a credit of 14 cents per square foot for their building permit if they built their new house to the visitable or type C standard found in ANSI A 1117.1. This was adopted back in June of 21 as a two-year program. Staff came back in March of 23, and it was discussed and agreed to extend it for an additional 2 years by this resolution and amendment. And it was approved by council for that 2-year period, and it is set to expire on August 1st, of this year. Some of the statistics of the program. We've had 67 participants in the program over the last several years. 10 have completed the program and received full credit. It is a pass-fail program. If you don't meet the whole standard, you do not receive the credit. 47 of those participants either withdrew or did not pass, and 10 are still in the program as of today. You kind of see outside of the year 2022, it's been a fairly steady 9 in 21, 7 in 23, 9 in 24, 2 so far this year. I would anticipate that we would be on par for the 7 or the 9, yes.
Do you know what was driving 40 applications in 2022?
Yes, we had one subdivision where the builder of that subdivision of every single house participated in this program. So that was
Kind of just like pending whether those actually got built and met all the criteria?
from what I understand, most did not meet the criteria, and that's
Part of the
his.
47 withdrew, did not pass, that's part of that development.
Yes, not all of them. Several did pass, and we're going to talk about a few of the reasons why, not particularly those, but why many have not passed.
If I could just add real
go ahead.
quickly, actually, 10 actually completed the program and received the credit. There's only 10 that did that. The 47, they all withdrew from the program or flat did not pass. So there's quite a few that did not pass or just flat out withdrew from.
Program.
Yep.
Yep.
So some of the reasons why, in discussions with applicants, hey, what happened? Why didn't you? Why couldn't you complete the program? Some of them applied for the program not realizing that their lot would not even allow them to complete the program. One of the requirements is a no-step entry. So if I park here on the street, I have to have a flat or a ramp to the front door. And as you see, this has steps. This would not comply because somebody in a wheelchair would not be able to make it. They'd have to have assistance, somebody rolling them up, rolling them up those steps, or maybe going along the grass, or maybe going through the garage, something of that nature. So this house, on the face of it, would not pass because they did not have a no-step entry. And drainage, large elevation changes can prove difficult to meet the visitable standard. Cannibalization. We have 2 incentive programs. The energy incentive program, where if somebody who's building a home decides that they want to build it energy-wise far above what the minimum required would be, they can also receive a stair-stepped up to 100% credit of their 14 cents a square foot building permit fee. This program is much more popular In the same time period, over the same number of years, we've had 650 homes enrolled in the energy credit program. That energy credit program was in pilot until about a year ago, and then it has been made permanent by ordinance. So those that may seek to do the visitable incentive are also, there's two incentives vying for the same fee, the same credit. So we see much more activity with the energy credit program. So those that would maybe do visitable are doing energy also. But here's an example of two houses that qualified for the energy credit program. They received 100% back on their in that incentive, but you notice they don't have any steps in their entry. They met the hardest part of the visitable incentive without trying. They didn't know or it didn't matter because they already knew that they were going to receive 100%.
I was gonna ask, so they
Yeah.
don't stack, really?
They do not.
Okay.
So they're both vying for the same 14 cents per square foot on your building permit fee, and once you get 100% of that back, there's no more to give back. So, they're both vying. So that's the reason for the cannibalization, is they're both vying for the same thing. But this is an example of houses that, with a little tweaking, could have possibly qualified for the visitable incentive.
Yeah, I just didn't know if there's, we talked about building permits. Are there any other fees associated with these that could be waived instead of a building permit? I know you've got connection fees, you've got some other things. Just trying to think of a way to basically get the most mileage out of both programs.
Great question. Discussed that with some of our staff just before the meeting.
Hi, I'm Beth Muckle, I'm with the legal department. Yeah, back in 21, whenever this was first adopted, there was extensive discussion about the fact that it would be dipping from the same pot as hers. And, there was a lot of struggle with that. Two different options were discussed. There's, the credit program that we have in place right now, which is essentially holding the fee and crediting it when they need it, so it's never paid, so there's never a refund or a reimbursement. We like that first because it's taking from the city's administrative fees, and it's not accounting for revenues that would normally be considered public funds in the first place, and it's crediting them instead of sending them back. So that's why that was the preferable mechanism. Now, whether there's other fees that are available, some were discussed back in 21. One was the connection fee. There are some issues with that are unique because they're enterprise funds that go back into a system where we are actually paying for services that are costs that are increases to us. Right. So we'll be losing our ability to pay that. So that's problematic, I know. In discussion with the finance department, they were aware of a previous discussion about park fees. And in that case, you're picking your incentives. Are you incentivizing parks versus, this program? Mm-hmm. So, that's a thought again, but one revenue reimbursement source that was also discussed was the idea of the taxes on the products that are used to build the homes by the developers. I'll just outright say there's a lot of red flags with that. It would require more discussion, and specifically with developers. The first issue being what I've already said, which is we have revenue that goes into the general fund and is public funds. Do we think that legally it's safe to really give those back to private parties? We have to be very careful with that. So it's the first threshold. But then it's just a question of some builders are buying in bulk. Are they really using all of this, receipt worth of lumber for this particular home, or did it go to other homes? How can they prove that? What about where they buy their product? Are they really buying it all in Norman? Because we have to be sure that we're not giving fees paid to other cities. And then there's the issue of confidentiality that I think at least one developer raised, where they may not feel comfortable giving us that much information about the cost of their business, but we would obviously need it to verify. So if we wanted to discuss that, I would say it starts with the developers and what they're able to share with us and see if we can reach a level to work with. So I'm sorry, there's a lot of hurdles,
Oh, yeah.
but there's still opportunity to find new sources or discuss more if you want to.
I think that would be my preference. I remember talking about that exact same thing last time, and my position then was, waiving the building permit is great, but I don't feel like the dollar amount justifies the expense that goes into putting, especially on the visitability one. The energy is a little different because you're buying just high energy rated appliances and things like that, but to put in all the extra expense for the, the backing for the grab bars, the ramps and all that stuff, it was hard to justify the costs because the incentive didn't really offset it enough. And so I'm just looking for another pot of money, magical pot at the end of the rainbow to fund all these programs we have. Because I support both of these and I think they're both great, but I'd like to see both of them maxed out, so.
Councilor Crew?
Have there been discussions with developers when you were preparing this? Just like, oh, I want to touch base, other than the challenges of meeting the pass or fail system. Did they have thoughts about savings they might find with this? Or
I don't know that I've been a part of any discussions, in particular outside of, hey, what happened? But outside of the challenges, but making them aware is something every permit, every time you apply for a permit, a townhouse, duplex, or new single-family permit, it asks you, do you want to participate in an incentive program? And then it lays out the two systems, the two programs, and you have to check a box which one you would like to participate in. So while I don't think we have reached out to every developer to let them know, hey, this is an option for your subdivision, the one applying for the permit is made aware when they apply for the permit.
And then I guess the other thought too, is there a checklist for folks when they say, yes, I want to do this, in ways being like, is your lot suitable for this program? Because you have to have zero entry. Is that something that's a part of it?
We've got a frequently asked questions document, and that's what I was pulling up right here. And this is available on our website. That walks them through just about every question that we could think of, every question that we've seen come up, every question that staff could think of what could hinder, what needs to be done to meet this requirement, and even down to links to some of the places that you need to go. Here's the visitability code itself, and we copy and pasted the requirements from the code in the document. That way we made it abundantly clear. Here's the threshold that we're I think that might actually be my next slide, but anyway, so this document is available on our website. I know I've shared it with several home builders as they're going through this program or interested in this program.
So when they check the box, they get a link to this document.
I don't know if do you know if they get
I don't believe that it happens that way.
Okay.
I don't believe that it does. It might should though. That's a good idea to have it just automatically go to if they click yes, go automatically to the FAQs.
Yeah, and I would assume, I'm not a builder, so I don't know, but I would assume like if you're checking a box on something and you wanna pursue it, you're looking at the documents to see if you can do it, but it sounds like maybe some of the people who withdrew didn't realize that part.
Perhaps.
Yep.
I think a lot of times folks are applying for both programs from the beginning and then they realize about halfway through that, and then of course towards the end, they're in a really big hurry to get a CO, so they run into issues with getting either getting the credit program, to get those reports. That takes a minute, takes a little bit of a minute to get that. So a lot of the times folks will have to withdraw from that program. But we've talked about getting with Tiffany and getting some information out to people about the HERS and the visitability programs, just to make people more aware.
Okay, thank you.
This is the slide about the threshold. One of the biggest reasons that people have failed, not only the no step or maybe they met the no step, but the custom or ornate door that they ordered came with a threshold from the manufacturer, and the builder does not want to retrofit an accessible or a low entry threshold, which is what we're just looking at in that FAQ, that frequently asked question document. As you can tell, that door on the right, you can't go buy that at Lowe's. You can't go pick it up. You're gonna custom order it, and it comes with a normal threshold that each one of us has at our house. But they would have to retrofit that door with a low entry threshold to meet the visitable requirements. Or this option here on the left, that's a fantastic looking front porch. I know my wife would absolutely love that. But because of the steps, it would be very difficult to meet the visitable requirements. You would have to end up with a ramp, and ramps are expensive, and they're hard to lay out, and they typically require much longer lengths than stairs would. So just some of the hurdles that builders run into with the threshold or the no step entry requirement. Our recommendation is to we would like to see this as a permanent program. So that way future builders and developers can rely that this will be here for time to come, and for future developments, future houses, townhouses and duplexes, that they don't have to wonder whether it will be there when they finish, or as they're planning this development, they're planning it to be, fully accessible throughout. They can plan on this incentive program being a part of their plan, or being a part of their permit pre-planning. Other options, or over time, while we haven't seen large amounts of usage, over time as energy, as you mentioned, energy is getting harder and harder and more difficult to meet, that energy program, that energy incentive may get more difficult than many builders would seek to pursue. As that happens, they may gravitate more towards the visitable incentive program. Instead of making this an ordinance, we could sunset it, let it end, or a different program with different parameters. Or we got in here, we could make visitable homes a requirement. There are some accessible requirements in the residential code as is for townhouses, but not for single family, not for duplexes.
Yeah, I was gonna ask,
Yep.
so with making it minimum standard, which honestly I wouldn't mind, but I understand there could be difficulties if the lot is not configured for that. Would that mean it would be, if somebody couldn't meet that, they'd have to apply for like a variance or something?
Yeah, it would have, yep, that'd be a variance or some sort of waiver. Yes, sir?
Oh,
Yeah, I was curious about
I
that.
figured you were gonna chime in on,
no, just kind of similar thoughts.
Yeah, I mean,
we could make if that's what we wanted to do, we could make, because it would be above the state minimum code, we could make it whatever we wanted. Right now, visitable is not required for new single-family houses in any form or fashion. But if
when somebody applies for a variance, does that cost money?
For board, that's why I was leaning forward, I was trying to figure out which variances we were talking about. For Board of Adjustment, yes, there's fees, notices, legal in the paper and stuff like that.
Could
So
you-
when we say variance, are we talking what we're going to adopt as code?
I would suggest we build, if this is the route we were to go, we would build in an administrative exception,
Okay,
is what I would suggest.
Yeah, cause I, wanna keep housing affordable and wouldn't want to impose like hundreds of dollars on someone. That just doesn't seem like a good avenue to go down, so.
Absolutely.
That was actually gonna be my comment. I'd be interested in making it standard, but I would really like to know what the cost difference is. Like, are we asking builders to put another $1,000 increased cost into their homes? Are we talking $10,000? What would be the, I want to say consequence, what would be the fallout from making it a minimum standard? But then also at the same time, is that an issue, this might be more for Beth than anybody, is that an issue that we would get preempted on by the state? Because we basically surpassed state minimum codes and we're creating our own requirements. Is that,
So as Brian said, the law as it's currently written is that we are allowed to pass higher standards.
okay, so that's probably not an issue.
Doesn't mean that law can't change, and that's the manner of preemption, that the state would pass a law specifically saying we can't do it that way, and that's how it would look. I would wanna research more into the idea of an administrative exception, because Jane is right that a variance from BOA is not what we would be looking at here. We'd be talking a variation to the applicability of the building code. And you know, that these codes are applied by the building official, the HJ. So we'd have to look into what manner of, I'm not as familiar with administrative exceptions within that context, so
But,
I'm gonna look and think about it.
What I mean by that is, this right here, fraught with exceptions. You know that.
Oh, yeah, there's,
Oh, exceptions written within the code, not to be administered by an administrative official
yeah,
necessarily,
there's a
I
lot,
see.
they use the
Sorry.
term a lot.
If I
Gotcha.
used the wrong language, I.
Yeah, identifying thresholds that we specifically write into the code, that's very doable if we can identify them.
Because I think, you know, even the ADA code speaks of, you know, technical infeasibility. Like if your lot, I forget what, if it's 15%, if you have to spend 15% on your budget to make accessibility improvements, then it's technically infeasible because the dollar amount is so high compared to the project cost. I'm sorry, I'm just,
No, you're fine. I just wanted to, can I ask a question? So we're saying make this option for a builder a permanent ordinance so that we don't have to come back and have sunset dates, but we're not saying make it a requirement, are we?
I was interested in what it would look like if the,
As a minimum standard.
As a
A
minimum.
minimum standard, okay.
yeah, I'm not saying that we're there yet, but
Okay.
what does that look like?
But I mean, I would be in favor of, making this permanent, not sunsetting, and if we could move to minimum standard, then it would moot that, so.
Okay.
But I feel like a minimum standard, it's a longer discussion and
Yeah.
more research is needed.
I think for the most part, it comes down to cost. I think for me, like, are we putting an undue burden on, you know, it was here at Norman so hard to develop in to begin with. I mean, I don't wanna do anything that furthers that narrative. But at the same time, if Norman could be known as the city that provides the most housing for aging in place or the most housing for, you know, accessibility issues, it's a title I'd love to have.
Absolutely, I like that. It's just, when you look at the numbers of how many people have actually passed
Right.
so far,
Right.
it has been very, very few. So it is a much larger discussion, I think, and one probably that would be great with our building official as well.
So do you think maybe if we extended it a year or 2 years, and then that gives us the time to do the research and have additional discussions? Because it expires in August.
This was just about to ask August.
Okay, I would take the feedback that you both have given, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we would be okay with making the program permanent.
Yeah.
And so we don't need to come back about that. We can just continue to have a discussion about, do we make it a minimum requirement at some point
Yeah, and if the,
instead of a incentive program?
sorry, let me cut you off.
Yeah.
I would say the alternative to making a minimum requirement is just making the incentive robust enough to where people actually take advantage of it. I know that's another conversation in itself, but it's either you make it the minimum to require it, or you incentivize it so much that people can't say no. So,
And maybe there's a way to have it both ways. Maybe the full visibility requirements aren't the minimum. That way we avoid ramps out front. Those that can't comply, because it's technically infeasible. Maybe that builds into that minimum standard discussion and allows the incentive program to remain in place, even solving both of those. So,
For now, make it permanent as an ordinance, and we'll
Very good.
all right.
continue the discussion after that.
clear as mud, right?
Thank you all very much.
Yeah. Anything else? Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right, the third item on the agenda is a discussion regarding the definition of a family in the zoning ordinance. I believe this is related to the three unrelated persons ordinance.
So Bryce said that I could move this down and it wouldn't. I wanted to have staff be able to sit up to their spot. Gosh, now I gotta get back out of this. Glasses. He's got so many things open. Okay. Thank you. All right, so we're here today to talk about something that we've had a lot of discussions about in the past. Oh, I'm sorry, this is Janita. She is with Code, and Jeannie Snyder deal a lot with a lot of the complaints that we receive, you know, when Code gets those calls about nuisance properties or, you know, parking and stuff like that. So I wanted Janita to be here so she can give some of the background information, but I want to get input from you, just some of the background. You know, we have the three unrelated definition, and it's been part of the zoning ordinance since 1954. Since I've been here multiple times, we have explored various avenues of enforcement. When we do have people that call in and say that there's too many people living in the house next door to them, and, you know, why aren't you enforcing the three unrelated? The complaints, you know, generally are traffic, parking, noise. And the city addresses occupancy to help ensure the health and safety of the residents and to protect the quality and character of the neighborhoods, of course. So one of the questions that, you know, we ask is, why do we eliminate this ordinance? You know, we do know, and we talk about this all the time, the housing. You know, cities are facing housing crisis, the rising costs. If we did eliminate it, it would allow for greater flexibility and affordability in housing choices. And the students, disabled, elderly, like we were just talking about, you know, the immigrants, the unhoused, you know, they often seek to live in cooperative housing. And in some of those cases, they would be discriminated against under the current occupancy limits that we have in place. We have low income who can't afford their own. And so, you know, we have some that are struggling to find market rate or affordable housing choices. And then we go back to the enforcement and how difficult it is when we do get those phone calls. And it's, I mean, I know you guys get the phone calls too, but, you know, it's frustrating for the neighbors that are calling in, but it's also frustrating for the people that are getting the notices. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to find some balance. So on the enforcement part of it, you know, it does require a large amount of staff time and research to administer when we do get these calls. It's difficult to prove those relations. The neighbors, it really does fall onto the neighbors because there's actually a form that's online, a log that we ask them to get the license plate numbers. And we have had some people, and Janita can speak to this, that have really taken the time and brought all that stuff into the city and have, you know, brought closure to some of the issues. But those neighbors are asked to spend a lot of time completing that. It really does put them in an awkward spot too, being the neighbor that's doing that. And again, it goes back to, you know, who this is impacting, you know, the multi-generational, culturally extended families, low-income households, the students. Number of complaints in 2023, a total of 19 were submitted. As you know, we note here, none resulted in citations. They were either closed or due to insufficient evidence. 2024, 8. One case resulted in a citation through municipal court, supported by evidence. The remaining cases were closed. In 2025, we do have one, and it's currently active. So what I want to talk about is considerations for changes. We do have the development code updates that we're going to be working on, but that's still 18 months. I mean, if you just want to say 2 years, I mean, I don't know. And then is, looking at the requirement, is it outdated? Like I said, it's part of the 1954 adoption. It's been a while, things have changed a lot. And not to mention the most recent, we do have the pandemic that we reflect back on, but just also families, components, they're changing. I mean, they are changing, that's all there is to it. Other city codes, that could help solve some of this is, or when we do get those complaints, we have the parking, the nuisance party, littering, disturbing the peace. Again, this does require the neighbors to call in and let us know.
Yeah, I was gonna say my thoughts were with our other codes that address this because I've had some of those calls about the 3 unrelated, but it really comes down to the parking or the noise or the trash, and those already have mechanisms to address that. So I feel like this is a discriminatory, outdated code that should go.
Do you speak to any of that?
I can agree with that, and we often have had, complaints. It's been quite unfair, some of the complaints have been, but as you said, it's parking, oftentimes it's parking on the street, and if they're having a party, but we do have the mechanisms in place to address those issues, and they work well. We've only had one that problem with the house we took to council last year, where they had an array of activities going on.
It was intense.
Yes, yeah, and so we were able to utilize our existing ordinances to address that significant situation there.
That was
But-
just 2 people, or
Yeah,
it wasn't 3 unrelated
Right,
people
right,
living there that
exactly,
were causing
yeah.
that problem.
yeah. But it is difficult, and what I have seen is that there are some people that because they know this is in the definition, they complain.
It's
They don't really
weaponized.
have an issue, and we can't even see an issue when we go out to inspect, but because they know it's there, they complain. And if they feel there are 4 college students in a house or, several adults living in a house, then they have submitted complaints.
Is this something could be challenged for discrimination? I mean, that's an angle I
I
hadn't
mean,
thought of before, and I just,
I'm surprised it hasn't
That's wild,
been
yeah.
since 1954, and
Yeah.
I've long time thought that it was unconstitutional if it was challenged.
It's been, there's a Supreme Court case from 1973 that is exactly on point. It is constitutional. It's never been, part has never been challenged. Across the country, I know Janita talks to people across the country, and it's just the enforceability of it, and I think since then, the change of folks, what is a family?
yeah, that's.
But there's still a case out there from the Supreme Court. It's still good law.
It just seems arbitrary
Yeah.
to me. 3 unrelated persons. What does that even mean? 3. Why 3? And then, what evidence is there that 3 unrelated people are worse neighbors than a family?
Well, you could have a
It could be
family
a
of
pretty bad.
8, and they could all have, 8 kids with,
It could
everybody
be
has a
pretty
car,
awful.
so.
Yeah.
Uh,
Go ahead.
I had a question about occupancy, speaking of mechanisms that already address issues, like if you had overcrowding in a house, isn't there technically what the house is rated to,
Well, we can utilize the International Property Maintenance Code, which has a specific square footage for each occupant in the sleeping rooms. So we can use that and it's been quite a while to my recollection that we used that in an apartment where there were a lot of, I think it was construction workers, and there was quite a few. So we utilized that and it helped address the situation. So that's an option we have.
There's the issue too of you got 3 college guys living together and their 3 girlfriends or boyfriends, whichever, come over and stay over every night. But they technically have an address and live somewhere else, but they
We had that
are
exact
there every night. So how
situation
do
in
you-
2015 or 16, and the neighbors kept I still have the notebook, spent hours, and it ended up boiling down to 3 boys and 3 girlfriends, and the girlfriends all had other addresses.
Yeah.
Parking is what really gets them. You get 4 or 5 people living there and they've got 3 Tahoes and 2 trucks or whatever. It's the parking that is the first trigger. The one in 24, I spent tons of time. I found out every vehicle owner. I contacted them by letter, contacted them by phone. I got the landlord to change their lease, to add a sentence on the front page of the lease. I mean, it was an effort, but that was the only one we dealt with in 24. And then once we get compliance, I dismiss the citation because they did everything.
That's interesting.
Some people just, it's on the books and that's what they want. That's what they tell me.
Yeah. So it just
Y'all can
seems
take it
real-
off the books.
real, yeah, arbitrary. It seems just there's ordinances where you can't park on the grass, and if that's a problem, then we should enforce that ordinance. And if there's
We do.
parties or littering, disturbing the peace, then we should enforce those. Yeah, I feel like 10 or 15 years ago, it would have been, and it has been, this discussion before and pushback against trying to repeal it, but yeah, like hardcore from some
I
neighborhoods.
mean, to me, it just harkens back to redlining and just really exclusionary zoning practices in the 50s
Yeah.
and 60s and.
I guess the Supreme Court disagrees, but I've always thought it was discriminatory. I just didn't see how there was no evidence that there's a difference.
Well, it's always been to maintain that character. If you read cases from back there too, if what I look through now, it's, we want to maintain the single-family neighborhood. We don't want to have the traffic. And
Oh, yeah.
the 73
I
case
know
says the exact same things that people say today.
I know all about the ordinances that cities like Norman were passing in the 50s to protect the integrity of neighborhoods. And we know what that meant.
That's exactly, yeah.
And so,
Don't have to beat around the bush either.
I was gonna say, when it comes to parking, you know, residents have another mechanism, which is they could decide to close one or both sides of the street. Like this particular code doesn't really help with any of that. It doesn't really give a mechanism other than you're gonna go report on your neighbors.
And it's really almost impossible to determine the family relationships. What do I ask for?
yeah.
And how do I force them to produce
Right.
birth certificates or something? So I get there and I'm always like, well, I can do a lot of things, but that I have no mechanism
There
to do
were
that.
questions too before same-sex marriage was affirmed by the Supreme Court, or however you want to look at that, about, you know, legally a same-sex couple is not a family, then not related.
Right.
And if they had adopted kids,
The
and so you've
kids,
got two
mother-in-law.
adults that are not related under the law, and they have adopted kids that are not related under the law, and I don't know of any case that actually that's an example of, but it was a question I remember coming up about, is it discriminatory?
Didn't pass the smell test.
So, okay.
So,
I don't-
you know, as we were talking about the existing family definition that we have in the zoning ordinance right now, obviously it's, you know, 2 or more persons, 3 unrelated persons, and then the group home as defined by Title 60 of the state. So this is what we have for you today for proposal. Going back to this, right, this is what we have on the books right now. And amending that,
I could have
Two.
kept that last line out there. Jane, I'm sorry about that. I should have deleted the strikeout, but.
oh, that's okay. Because, well, you referenced it above. So family means single family comprised of one of the following. A number of persons. Clears it up. Cohabitating in a single dwelling, but we also kept the group home, which I believe we have to keep
Yes.
that by law,
State
yes.
law.
Yes, so we keep that in there and reference Title 60, and that would help.
Is group home like something like an Oxford house or anything in that vein?
Oxford houses are totally different from the group homes defined in this. This is like the juvenile homes for juveniles that are in the custody of the state. And the group home is six or less, and they want them to also live in a family type situation and neighborhood.
Stability.
Beth and I have been down this road how many times last year, but yeah, state law requires that we allow that. Neighbors don't like that either, but.
It'd be like the able.
No, it's like, I mean, they're just
Houses.
in it could be
Group
next door
homes.
to you, and it could be 6 kids that have some type of
Physical
physical
or
or
a
developmental,
developmental disability.
and they have no
Require
parents.
services.
They've been removed from the parents' home, And then they live now, we have, I think, about 10 in Norman, I think, something. I might be getting that confused with the Oxford houses, but we have a few in Norman, and they do cause some concerns for the neighbors.
What about like bridges?
Over across the street from North.
Yeah.
I don't know how they're
It's just a
zoned.
multifamily.
It's- right.
apartment.
Not considered, okay.
I'm cool with group homes, so.
I'm just playing devil's advocate here. The only heartburn I have about this is, you're basically saying you could put 60 people in one home. I mean, there's no upper limit. And so do we get into,
I think they'd have to meet
do we
occupancy.
create a secondary problem for ourselves?
But I think that goes back to, and I would look to Janina
Okay.
for the code that she would be enforcing for square footage, minimum square footage per
Gotcha, okay.
individual in a bedroom.
Okay.
And in a situation where it's a rental, you know, we would probably have more leeway, I would think, with telling the property owner, this is the property maintenance code, these are the requirements you must meet, things of that nature. If it's an owner occupied structure and they choose to have multiple people in there, I'm not real sure exactly how that would work. As far as forcing our way in to prove that, it'd be something for us to pursue, but, you know, it's an option, is using the property maintenance code for all of that.
Because you can't say it's just number of bedrooms, because my kids have bunk beds, so you have 2 kids sleeping in one room, so it's not really.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just trying to game scenario this out.
Well,
Um,
Before I go to the next slide, which has some information about some other states, you know, one of the things that we had in here and I took out because I didn't want to, I'm not in the other cities, so I don't know why they ended up with 5. Why they ended up with 6. You know, that was the number that they chose. You know, maybe they were at the 3, I don't know, but then they're now at 5 is what they adopted, you know. But then on this slide, there are several, you know, Austin, Colorado, Washington State. In 2023, Austin ended its cap. 2024 eliminated in Colorado the eliminated occupancy limits. And then Washington State also as well. But, you know, and I understand, Councilor Peacock, that is kind of the concern, is if we just say a number of persons cohabitating in a single dwelling, what does that say, right? But there are the other regulations that are in place. Or if you guys want to, you know, we could look at putting a number in there, but I think it puts us right back in the same spot we were, whether it's 3, 6.
Pulling a number out of the air and saying
Right.
this is
Right,
fact. Yeah.
right.
I mean, I've got a little less heartburn now that we know there's some checks and balances in it, and there's some other codes and requirements that we could enforce. That's just what jumped out to me about that. I mean, it just seems open-ended.
I was gonna say, I like Colorado's, cause that just clarifies, you know, kind of what you were having heartburn about, the case being made for health, safety, and fire code needs. But those would already, because that exist, it would just be a way of phrasing it that, you know, didn't leave any doubt for somebody who was just reading it.
Yeah, if there's 30 people in a house, the fire marshal can go over there and say there's an unsafe situation.
Is Westbrook Terrace in your ward?
What streets are that off?
It's
By the
south
golf
of,
course.
south of Lindsay, and it would be
Oh, no, I'm
east
sorry.
of Berry, right?
Yeah.
Some more too.
Two? Oh, okay,
Yeah.
very good, thank you.
Is that you?
East of-
Wait,
East
East
of
of
Berry
Berry
is
is Ward 4, West
Oh,
of Berry
yeah,
is
yeah.
Ward 2.
Yeah, Westbrook Terrace is in Ward 2.
Okay.
Ward 2, yeah. They're very committed neighbors there about this ordinance, about not getting rid of it.
Is
That-
it because of
They just-
issues in
They've
their
had one
neighborhood?
house, but that's my main street that I get phone calls. Just,
can-
and they're lovely, lovely people. I know some of them personally, but they just don't like
can
this one
enforce
house.
this.
It's being sold, so that's solves that, but
But we can enforce the concerns they have
I
based off our other policy.
I didn't know whose ward that was in.
Well, the house I lived on Dean's Row, was an old sorority house, and it had 14 bedrooms in it, and it had, at one time, at first it had 17 bedrooms. There were 3 bedrooms in the basement that we removed the walls. They were like hanging from the ceiling. They weren't even connected to the floor. But, I mean, at one time, there were probably 20 people that lived there, the winter of 2008.
There were actual separate bedrooms or separate units
There are
built
14
in?
bedrooms in the house with
Bedrooms.
one kitchen.
I was gonna say
Oh,
something.
okay.
But it would have been about the same amount of based on some of the historic pictures I saw of the house, about the same number of people as when it was a sorority.
I was gonna say in that scenario, it wasn't the three unrelated, it was fire code, so.
Yeah, our neighbors didn't complain about us, but that was a case where the house was big enough to accommodate that number of people living in it. And so, I think, like she said, we can enforce based on the per square footage and all that, if it's a number of people, if it's parking, if it's noise, if it's trash. And so, I always thought this ordinance was problematic and really unenforceable in a lot of ways, and just having to have the residents be the ones that do the whole investigation thing is like,
It really creates a problem.
yeah, it is.
And that's
And so
Very hard to tell them
uncomfortable
that.
for them.
it's just always seemed inefficient and doesn't really accomplish the goal of whatever.
Yeah, and I think, I may have said it when we first started, but it's just always been disappointing when the neighbors do call in and they say that this is, an ordinance that's on the books. Well, it's not really an ordinance that's on the books, but it's the definition that's in the zoning code, right? But then we do have trouble enforcing it. And so then it's disappointing to them, even if they do keep the logs and everything. And so it's hard. There's never an easy answer on this one.
That's true.
Whether we make it a number of individuals, we're still gonna have to go through that legwork of, the other codes that we're gonna have to work through.
And truthfully, when I was looking at some of the number of complaints that we had, the majority of them were submitted to us anonymously, so we wouldn't even be able to go back to this neighbor to ask any questions or discuss anything with them, so.
It looked like the overwhelming majority of them weren't, there was no
Exactly what I'm saying.
finding of wrongdoing.
Oftentimes, what I've discovered is, a couple of times, I should say, a landlord would call after receiving the letter and say, "Oh, I wasn't aware this was a requirement. We've got a lease with these students until May. Can you give me until then? And then I'll comply and go down to three occupants." So that has happened on several occasions that the property owner just complies after they're aware of the requirements. But
I think we had it.
Correction?
Did you say direction? Oh, yeah, get rid of it and.
I'd say-
The new language.
Enforce the existing policies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with Councilman Gray about taking that language from the Colorado one where they said, unless there's, I forget what it said, circumstances involving health, safety, and welfare. Yeah, I just think that, that gives fire marshal or whoever some authority to step in if need be. But yeah, I say get rid of it.
Thank you. And move forward on it whenever we can get it on the next meeting.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank y'all.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'm so happy.
You get to be done now, Stephen?
All right, I think, is there any final comments or anything? Okay, all right, thank you all.